He was a billionaire who'd forgotten how to feel. His son hadn't spoken in 3 years. Then she walked into their lives and changed everything. Ethan Hayes built an empire, but lost his heart when his wife died. His 6-year-old son Noah became a ghost, silent, unreachable, trapped in trauma no specialist could penetrate. Until the day Ethan heard laughter echoing through his cold mansion and discovered his mute son playing with the new maid. Amara Nwosu had secrets buried beneath her gentle smile. She was running from a violent past, hiding in plain sight as domestic help. But she possessed something no amount of money could buy, the ability to reach a broken child's heart. What begins as gratitude transforms into obsession. What starts as healing becomes love. And when her dangerous past threatens everything, Ethan will prove that some bonds are worth burning the world to protect. This is the first smile. Subscribe to witness a love that heals the deepest wounds. The sound stopped Ethan Hayes' mid-step on the marble staircase. Laughter. A child's laughter, bright and unrestrained, echoing through the cavernous halls of his mansion like music he'd forgotten existed. His hand gripped the banister so hard his knuckles went white. His heart, that dead thing in his chest that only beat out of biological necessity, suddenly hammered against his ribs with painful intensity. Noah hadn't laughed in 3 years. Not since the accident. Not since his mother's funeral. Not since the day he stopped speaking entirely and became a silent shadow haunting the corners of this too-large house. Ethan took the remaining stairs 2 at a time, his expensive Italian shoes silent on the thick carpet of the second-floor hallway. The laughter was coming from the playroom, the room he'd filled with every toy imaginable, desperate attempts to coax some response from his son. The room where Noah usually sat alone, staring at nothing, unreachable behind walls of trauma that no amount of money or specialists could penetrate. He pushed the door open and froze. His son, his beautiful, broken son, was on the floor, not sitting rigid and alone as usual, but sprawling on his stomach, pushing a red toy car across the carpet. And beside him, matching his position with unself-conscious ease, was a woman Ethan had never seen before. She was young, maybe late 20s, with rich dark skin that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she wore the plain gray uniform of the household staff. But what stopped Ethan's breath wasn't her appearance. It was the way Noah was looking at her. His son's eyes, usually flat and distant, were alive, focused, present. And the blue car, the woman was saying in a soft voice touched with an accent Ethan couldn't immediately place. He says to the red car, "Let's go to the mountain together." "Do you think they should go?" Noah didn't answer. Of course he didn't answer. He hadn't spoken in 3 years, but he pushed the blue car toward the red one. The woman's face lit up with a smile so genuine it seemed to fill the entire room with warmth. "Yes, they're going together. What good friends they are." She made soft rumbling sounds, mimicking an engine, and Noah's lips curved upward. Not quite a smile, but close. So impossibly close. Then it happened. Noah made a sound. A soft mm as he pushed his car, imitating the rumbling she'd made. The world tilted. Ethan's vision blurred. His son, his mute, traumatized son, had just made a sound. A voluntary, communicative sound. The first in over 1,000 days of silence. The woman glanced up and saw him standing in the doorway. Her smile faltered, replaced by startled recognition. She immediately began to stand, her posture shifting into something defensive and apologetic. "Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "Don't move." His voice came out harsher than he intended, rough with the emotions clawing up his throat. "Don't stop what you're doing." She froze, uncertain, her dark eyes wide. Noah's head had turned at his father's voice, and Ethan watched his son's expression begin to shut down, that familiar blankness creeping back across his features. "Please," Ethan said, softer this time. "Continue. Whatever you were doing. Continue." The woman looked between father and son, clearly trying to read the situation. Then she slowly lowered herself back to the floor, her movements careful and deliberate. "Noah," she said gently, "should we keep playing?" Noah's eyes flickered to her face, then back to the cars. After a long moment, he pushed the red car forward again. "Good," she murmured, her voice dropping back into that soothing rhythm. "The cars are going up the mountain now. It's a big mountain." She made the rumbling sound again. "And Noah, Miracle of miracles. Made the sound again too. Ethan had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. 3 years. 3 years of the best child psychologists money could buy. Specialists who flew in from Europe. Experimental therapies. Medications. Behavioral interventions. Nothing had worked. Nothing had even come close. And this woman, this maid he'd never met, had accomplished in one afternoon what an army of experts couldn't achieve in 3 years. He needed to know who she was. He needed to understand how this was possible. And more than anything, he needed to make sure she never left this house. Ethan forced himself to step back from the doorway, to leave them to their play, though every instinct screamed at him to stay and watch, to witness every precious moment of his son's awakening. But he knew his presence was a disruption. Noah always tensed when he was near, always retreated further into himself. He made his way down to the kitchen where he found Mrs. Chun, his head of household staff, preparing dinner. The new woman, he said without preamble. In the playroom with Noah. Who is she? Mrs. Chun looked up from the vegetables she was chopping, surprise crossing her weathered features. That's Amara Nwosu, sir. She started this morning. We hired her as additional housekeeping staff, but I sent her upstairs to check on Master Noah when I heard him crying earlier. He was crying? Ethan's chest constricted. Why wasn't I informed? You were in your study with the door closed, sir. You'd asked not to be disturbed for your conference call with Tokyo. Mrs. Chin's tone was carefully neutral. It wasn't the first time. I thought it best to handle it quietly. Guilt and frustration warred in Ethan's gut. His son had been crying, and he'd been on a business call, completely oblivious. What happened when she went to him? I'm not entirely sure, sir. I heard the crying stop about 10 minutes after I sent her up. When I checked on them an hour ago, they were playing quietly. I assumed everything was fine. Everything is more than fine. Ethan pulled out his phone and typed a rapid message to his assistant. I want a complete background check on Amara Nwosu. Everything. Education, employment history, family, everything. I want it on my desk by morning. Mrs. Chin's eyebrows rose slightly. Sir, we already did a standard background check before hiring. I want more than standard. I want to know everything about her. He paused, realizing how that sounded. She has a gift with Noah. I need to understand it. Of course, sir. Ethan started to leave, then turned back. Double her salary. Effective immediately. And move her to the East Wing guest suite. Sir, those are quarters for. I don't care what they're usually for. She'll need to be close to Noah. The East Wing is across from his room. When Mrs. Chun hesitated, he added, Is there a problem? No, sir. I'll have it prepared immediately. Ethan returned to the second floor, but instead of going back to the playroom, he went to his study. The room was dark wood and leather, filled with the trappings of success. Awards, photographs with world leaders, framed magazine covers proclaiming him one of the world's youngest self-made billionaires. None of it meant anything. None of it had saved his wife. None of it could reach his son. Until today, he pulled up the mansion's security cameras on his computer. He'd had them installed throughout the house after the accident, paranoid about Noah's safety. Now he navigated to the playroom feed. The woman, Amara, was still on the floor with Noah. They'd moved on from cars to building blocks. She was stacking them while telling what sounded like a story, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. Noah wasn't stacking blocks himself, but he was watching her intently, and every so often, he would hand her a block when she reached out. The simple act of cooperation nearly broke Ethan. His son was engaging. Actually engaging with another human being. He watched them for over an hour, transfixed. Amara never pushed Noah, never demanded responses or tried to force interaction. She simply created a warm, safe space and invited him into it. When Noah pulled back, she gave him space. When he leaned in, she welcomed him. It was like watching a master musician play an instrument, every movement precise and intentional, yet somehow completely natural. Eventually, she glanced at the window, noting the fading light. It's almost dinner time, she said softly. I should go help Mrs. Chun. But tomorrow, if you want, we could play again. Noah's face fell. It was a subtle change, but Ethan had become an expert in reading his son's micro-expressions. The boy didn't want her to leave. Amara saw it too. Hey, she said gently. I'm not going far. I'll be right downstairs. And I'll come say goodnight before bed, okay? Noah stared at her for a long moment, then did something that made Ethan's breath catch. He reached out and touched her hand. Just a brief press of his small fingers against hers, but it was contact. Voluntary, intentional contact. Amara's eyes grew bright with moisture. She blinked rapidly and smiled. I'll take that as a yes. I'll see you soon, sweet boy. She stood gracefully and left the room. Ethan watched Noah on the screen. His son sat still for a moment, then slowly returned to the blocks, building a small tower by himself. Not retreating entirely back into his shell. Still present, still engaged with the world around him, even alone. Ethan closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He needed to handle this carefully. If this woman was the key to reaching Noah, he couldn't afford to lose her. He couldn't afford to do anything that might disrupt whatever magic she'd worked this afternoon. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Background check initiated. We'll have preliminary results tonight. Full report by morning as requested. Good. He needed to know who Amara Nwosu was. And more importantly, he needed to know how to make sure she stayed. Amara was exhausted by the time she finished helping serve dinner and clean the kitchen. The Hayes mansion was unlike anything she'd experienced, opulent to the point of being overwhelming. She'd worked in nice houses before, but this was different. This was wealth on a scale that felt almost obscene. But the house felt empty, cold, like a museum rather than a home. Except for that little boy, Noah. Her heart ached thinking about him. She'd seen that kind of shutdown before, back in Lagos when she'd worked at the children's center. Trauma manifested in so many ways, and selective mutism was one of the most heartbreaking. When Mrs. Chun had sent her upstairs to check on his crying, Amara had expected to find a tantrum or ordinary childhood distress. Instead, she'd found a little boy sitting in the corner of his playroom, tears streaming silently down his face, rocking slightly back and forth. She'd recognized the signs immediately. This wasn't a child who needed discipline or distraction. This was a child who needed to feel safe. So she'd sat down on the floor, not too close, and started humming. An old Igbo lullaby her grandmother used to sing. She didn't speak at first, didn't try to force interaction. She just hummed and gently tapped a rhythm on the floor, creating a soundscape that was soothing, predictable, safe. Eventually, Noah's rocking had slowed. His crying had stopped. And when she'd started playing with the toy cars, making soft sounds and telling simple stories, he'd slowly, cautiously, moved closer. The breakthrough had been miraculous and terrifying. Because Amara knew she couldn't stay in this house, couldn't get attached to this child, no matter how much she wanted to help him. She was only supposed to be here temporarily. A few months to save money, then disappear again. Keep moving, keep hidden. That was the plan. That was survival. But Noah's face when she'd said she had to leave the playroom. Amara. She turned to find Mrs. Chin approaching with a kind smile. Mr. Hayes has requested that you move to the East Wing guest suite. It's closer to Master Noah's room. I've already had your things transferred. Amara blinked. I'm sorry, what? The guest suite? But I'm staff. Mr. Hayes was very clear. He wants you close to Noah. Mrs. Chin's expression softened. I don't know what you did up there today, but I've never seen that boy respond to anyone the way he responded to you. Mr. Hayes, he's been desperate to reach his son. You've given him hope. No. This was exactly what couldn't happen. She couldn't become important to this family. Couldn't become someone they relied on. Mrs. Chun, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not a nanny. I'm not qualified to. Mr. Hayes has also doubled your salary. Amara's words died in her throat. Doubled? She'd been making barely above minimum wage. Even doubled. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than she'd seen in months. Money she desperately needed. He's very generous, she managed. He's very determined, Mrs. Chun corrected gently. When Ethan Hayes wants something, he usually gets it. And right now, he wants you to help his son. She paused. But if you're uncomfortable with any of this, you should tell him. He can be intense, but he's not unreasonable. Amara thought about Noah's small hand touching hers. About the soft sound he'd made. The first verbal expression this child had made in who knew how long. About the way his eyes had focused on her face, really seeing her, connecting with her. I'll stay, she heard herself say. At least for now. Mrs. Chin smiled. Good. Come, I'll show you to your new room. And Mr. Hayes would like to speak with you in his study before you retire for the night. Of course he would. Amara followed Mrs. Chun through the labyrinthine mansion, trying to calm the anxiety building in her chest. She'd been in situations like this before, Powerful men who thought their wealth entitled them to anything they wanted. She knew how to handle them, how to be invisible, how to deflect. But something about Ethan Hayes unsettled her. The way he'd looked at her in the playroom doorway, his expression raw with desperate hope. That wasn't the look of a man who saw her as an object or a servant. That was the look of a drowning man who'd just spotted a lifeline. The East Wing guest suite turned out to be larger than the apartment she'd fled 3 months ago. It had a bedroom, sitting area, and private bathroom with fixtures that probably cost more than she made in a year. Her single duffel bag of belongings looked absurd sitting on the plush king-sized bed. "I'll let Mr. Hayes know you're settled," Mrs. Chin said. "His study is on the first floor, West Wing. You can't miss it. It's the only door that's always closed." After Mrs. Chin left, Amara sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process the rapid changes to her situation. This morning she'd been a new maid, invisible and anonymous. Now she was in a guest suite, earning double salary, and apparently essential to a billionaire's household. It was too much. Too visible. Too dangerous. But Noah's face wouldn't leave her mind. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened the door to find a man in an expensive suit. Not quite as expensive as what Ethan Hayes had been wearing, but close. "Ms. Nwosu? Mr. Hayes is ready to see you now. I'll escort you to his study." The walk through the mansion felt longer than it should have. Amara's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe he wanted to explain the arrangement more clearly. Maybe he had questions about her methods with Noah. Maybe he discovered something about her past, and this was all about to implode. The study door was indeed closed. The man knocked twice and opened it without waiting for a response. "Ms. Nwosu, sir." "Thank you, Marcus." Ethan Hayes stood from behind an enormous desk. He'd changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a gray sweater that somehow made him look more intimidating rather than less. Maybe it was because the casual clothes revealed more of his physique. Tall, broad-shouldered, the build of someone who worked out religiously despite his billionaire status. He was handsome in that sharp, calculated way of powerful men. Dark hair starting to gray at the temples, strong jawline, ice blue eyes that seemed to see too much. He looked to be in his late 30s, though the grief lines around his eyes aged him. "Please sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. Amara sat, keeping her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. "Professional. Invisible. Safe. I want to thank you," Ethan said, remaining standing, his hands in his pockets. "For what you did today with Noah. I realize you weren't hired to be a nanny or therapist, but what I witnessed this afternoon was remarkable. He's a special little boy," Amara said carefully. "He just needed someone to meet him where he was." "Where he was?" Ethan repeated, his voice heavy. "And where is that exactly?" The question surprised her with its rawness. This wasn't a billionaire demanding information from an employee. This was a father desperate to understand his son. "He's scared," Amara said simply. "And when people are scared, they shut down. They build walls. Noah's walls are just more visible than most." Ethan's jaw tightened. The therapists have said similar things. But none of them could reach him. Because they were trying to tear down the walls. You don't tear down walls when someone's hiding behind them. You just make them build the walls higher. Amara leaned forward slightly. You have to make them want to come out. You have to make the world outside the walls feel safer than the world inside. And how do you do that? Patience. Consistency. No demands. No pressure. Just presence. Being there. Being safe. Being steady. Eventually, they take a risk. They reach out. And you welcome it without making it a big deal. Without celebrating so much that you scare them back behind the walls. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. You sound like you have experience with this. Careful. Don't reveal too much. I've worked with children before. Back home. In Nigeria? She nodded, unsurprised that he'd already learned at least that much about her. Lagos. I worked at a children's center for a few years. Why did you leave? The question was casual, but she could feel the weight behind it. He was assessing her, trying to determine if she was trustworthy. If she was safe to have around his son. Personal reasons, she said, meeting his eyes steadily. Nothing that would affect my work here. It wasn't technically a lie. Her reasons for leaving were personal. They just also involved a restraining order, death threats, and a midnight escape with nothing but a duffel bag and her grandmother's necklace. Ethan studied her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he saw more than she wanted him to. But after a moment, he nodded. I'm increasing your salary, he said. And changing your job description. As of tomorrow, you're Noah's primary caregiver. Not a nanny. I know he already has a nanny on staff, but you'll spend your days with him. Playing, reading, whatever you think he needs. Amara's heart hammered. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate the offer, but it's not an offer. It's a position. One I'm hoping you'll accept. He moved around the desk, leaning against it, closer to her now. My son made sounds today. Real, communicative sounds. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what you accomplished in a single afternoon? I understand that he felt safe enough to express himself, Amara said carefully. But Mr. Hayes, I'm not a licensed therapist. I can't. I don't want a therapist. I've had a dozen therapists. I want someone who can reach him. Ethan's voice dropped, became rougher. I want someone who can bring my son back to me. The naked vulnerability in those words made Amara's chest ache. She thought about saying no. About explaining that she couldn't stay, couldn't get attached, couldn't let anyone depend on her. But then she thought about Noah. About his small hand touching hers. About the way his eyes had lit up during their play. I'll try, she heard herself say. But I can't make any promises. Every child is different. What worked today might not work tomorrow. I understand. The relief in Ethan's expression was palpable. But you'll try. That's all I'm asking. He returned to his chair, and the vulnerability was replaced by the cool efficiency of a businessman negotiating terms. They discussed schedules, responsibilities, boundaries. The nanny, Mrs. Patterson, would continue to handle Noah's basic care, meals, bedtime, medical needs. Amara would focus on engagement, play, emotional development. It was all very professional and carefully outlined. But beneath the business discussion, Amara could feel something else. A desperate hope. A father clinging to the first real chance he'd had in years to connect with his son. As the meeting concluded and she stood to leave, Ethan spoke again. One more thing. I promised Noah you'd say goodnight to him. Amara blinked. You? How did you know I promised that? A slight flush colored his cheeks. I may have checked the security cameras. I wanted to see what happened. How you worked with him. The admission should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt honest. A father so desperate to understand his son that he'd watched security footage for answers. I'll go to him now, Amara said. Noah's bedroom was across the hall from her new suite. The door was slightly ajar, soft light spilling into the hallway. She knocked gently. Noah? It's Amara. Can I come in? No response, but she heard movement. She pushed the door open slowly. The room was every child's dream, filled with toys, books, a bed shaped like a race car. But Noah sat in the corner farthest from the door, knees pulled to his chest, that familiar guarded expression on his face. Mrs. Patterson, an older woman with kind eyes, stood nearby. He won't get into bed, she said softly. He's been like this every night. Eventually he exhausts himself, and I can move him. May I? Amara asked. Mrs. Patterson nodded and quietly left the room. Amara sat down on the floor several feet from Noah. She didn't approach, didn't touch, just sat. I said I'd come say goodnight, she said gently. So here I am, saying goodnight. She started humming that same Igbo lullaby from earlier. Soft, rhythmic, soothing. And she waited. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, Noah's rigid posture began to relax. His knees lowered slightly. His breathing deepened. Amara kept humming, adding a gentle tapping rhythm against her thigh. In Lagos, she'd learned that traumatized children often responded to rhythm and repetition. It created predictability in an unpredictable world. After what felt like an hour but was probably only 15 minutes, Noah's eyes began to droop. She stood slowly, still humming, and moved toward the race car bed. She pulled back the covers invitingly but didn't approach Noah. He watched her with heavy-lidded eyes. Then, miracle of miracles, he stood on shaky legs and walked to the bed. He climbed in and let her pull the covers up to his chin. Good night, sweet boy, she whispered, still humming softly. I'll see you in the morning. She turned to leave and felt a small hand catch her fingers. She looked back. Noah was staring at her with those huge, solemn eyes. He didn't make a sound, but his grip said everything. Don't go. Amara's heart cracked open. She'd promised herself she wouldn't get attached. Couldn't get attached. But looking at this broken child who'd found the courage to reach for her. I'll stay until you fall asleep, she promised. She sat on the edge of the bed, and Noah didn't let go of her hand. She hummed and tapped gentle rhythms until his breathing evened out and his grip relaxed into sleep. When she finally extracted her hand and stood, she found Ethan Hayes standing in the doorway. He was staring at his son's peaceful sleeping face with an expression of such profound emotion that Amara had to look away. It felt too intimate, too raw to witness. "He hasn't slept like that in 3 years," Ethan whispered. "Usually he cries himself to exhaustion, or I have to give him medication. He feels safe," Amara said softly. "That's all most of us need to rest. To feel safe." Ethan's eyes met hers, and in them she saw grief and gratitude and something else. Something that made her want to run and stay in equal measure. "Thank you," he said simply. Amara nodded and slipped past him into the hallway, her heart pounding. She made it to her suite and closed the door, leaning against it. This was dangerous. She'd known it from the moment she'd seen Noah's face. But she'd underestimated how dangerous. Because it wasn't just Noah she was getting attached to. It was the broken family. The cold mansion that wanted so desperately to be warm again. The father who watched his son with such longing. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen. She should call her contact, tell them she needed to move again. That this situation was too risky, too complicated. But instead, she set the phone down and climbed into the too-soft bed in the too-luxurious room. And for the first time in months, she let herself imagine staying. Just for a little while. Just long enough to help that little boy smile. What could it hurt? The weeks that followed established a routine that felt simultaneously natural and surreal. Amara spent her days with Noah, gradually expanding their interactions from the playroom to other parts of the mansion. The garden became a favorite. She'd tell stories while they sat in the grass, and Noah would sometimes make soft sounds in response. He wasn't speaking yet, but the sounds were increasing. Little hums and sighs and even, once, something that sounded almost like a giggle. Ethan watched. He was always watching. Sometimes in person, appearing in doorways and along hallways. Other times through the cameras. She'd catch the subtle shift of the lens following their movements. It should have bothered her. Should have felt invasive. But somehow it didn't. Because she recognized what she saw in Ethan's face during those moments. It wasn't possession or control. It was desperate hope. The look of a man watching a miracle unfold and terrified it might disappear. One afternoon, 3 weeks after she'd started, Amara was in the garden with Noah when Ethan joined them. He'd been doing that more often, trying to integrate himself into the safe space she'd created with his son. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the grass beside them. Amara nodded. Noah tensed slightly but didn't retreat. "Progress." They sat in silence for a while. Amara had learned that Ethan was actually quite good at being quiet, at not demanding attention or interaction. He just wanted to be near his son, to exist in the same space. "I have a meeting in New York next week," Ethan said eventually, his voice casual but his posture tight. 3 days. "I'm considering canceling." "Why?" Amara asked, even though she already knew. "Because I don't want to miss anything. If Noah speaks, if he has a breakthrough." "Mr. Hayes," Amara said gently. "You can't put your entire life on hold waiting for a specific moment. Noah will have breakthroughs and setbacks. It's not linear. I know that intellectually." But, he stopped, his jaw clenching. Amara understood. He'd already missed so much. 3 years of his son's life, stolen by trauma and grief. The thought of missing even a moment more was unbearable. "What if I promise to record everything?" she offered. "I'll send you videos, updates. You'll be able to see every moment, even if you're not physically here." Ethan's expression softened. "You would do that?" "Of course. Noah needs you, but he also needs you to be okay. To be functional. You can't take care of him if you're not taking care of yourself and your responsibilities." Something shifted in Ethan's eyes. He looked at her differently than he had before, not just as Noah's caregiver, but as someone who cared about his well-being too. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for understanding." Before Amara could respond, Noah did something extraordinary. He crawled across the grass and pressed a dandelion into Ethan's hand. Ethan stared at the flower as if it were made of pure gold. His entire body trembled. "Thank you, buddy," he whispered, his voice cracking. Noah didn't respond, but he stayed close. Didn't immediately retreat. And when Ethan carefully tucked the dandelion into his shirt pocket, Noah's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. Amara's eyes burned. She looked away, giving them privacy for this fragile moment. "I should probably get back inside," she said after a few minutes. "I promised Mrs. Chun I'd help with dinner prep." You don't have to do that anymore, Ethan said. Your role has changed. You're not housekeeping staff. I know, but I like helping. It keeps me grounded. Ethan studied her. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more, impressed by all this. He gestured vaguely at the mansion, the grounds, the obvious wealth surrounding them. Most people are. Most people haven't had to hide in places far worse than this, Amara said before she could stop herself. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Hide from what? Damn. She'd said too much. Nothing. I just meant, this is beautiful. But beauty doesn't impress me as much as safety does. It was deflection, and they both knew it. But Ethan let it go. For now. That night, after Noah was asleep, Amara found herself unable to settle. She wandered down to the mansion's library, a two-story space filled with more books than she could read in a lifetime. She was running her fingers along the spines when a voice spoke from behind her. Couldn't sleep? She turned to find Ethan in the doorway, holding a glass of whiskey. Just restless, she admitted. It's a beautiful collection. My wife's doing. She was an avid reader. He entered the library, moving to one of the reading chairs. Most of these, I've never touched. But she loved them. Amara heard the past tense, the weight of loss. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Hayes. Ethan, he corrected. And thank you. Though I imagine you already know the basic story. It was all over the news 3 years ago. She had looked it up, curious. Car accident. His wife had died instantly. Noah had been in the back seat, physically unharmed but psychologically shattered. I can't imagine what that was like, Amara said softly. For either of you. Ethan took a long drink. The day after the funeral, Noah stopped speaking. Just stopped. And I realized I'd lost both of them. My wife was gone, and my son was trapped somewhere I couldn't reach. He laughed, but it was a broken sound. I built an empire. I can negotiate billion-dollar deals and crush competitors without breaking a sweat. But I can't figure out how to talk to my own son. That's because business is logical. Grief isn't. Trauma isn't. But you understand it. You know how to navigate it. Amara hesitated. Then, perhaps because it was late and the library felt like a confessional, she said, I understand it because I've lived it. Ethan straightened. What happened to you? Nothing I want to talk about, she said quickly. But I know what it's like to be scared. To shut down. To build walls and hide behind them. And what made you come out from behind your walls? The question hung in the air between them. Amara thought about lying, deflecting again. But something in Ethan's eyes, a genuine desire to understand, not just her, but how to help his son, made her answer honestly. I haven't, she admitted. Not completely. I'm still hiding. Still scared. But I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying. Ethan stood and moved closer. Not threateningly, just closer. What are you scared of, Amara? Everything, she wanted to say. Being found. Being hurt. Being trapped again. Matching to someone and then losing them. The same things everyone's scared of, she said instead. Being seen. Being vulnerable. Getting attached. Is that why you keep deflecting my questions about your past? She nodded. I'm having you investigated, Ethan said bluntly. I need to know who I'm trusting with my son. The report should be complete any day now. Most people would have been angry at that admission. Amara just felt tired. Of course you are. I would do the same in your position. I can call it off. If you tell me yourself. If you trust me enough to share your story without me forcing it from the shadows. It was a test and an offer. A chance to control her own narrative before it was discovered and interpreted by strangers. But Amara wasn't ready. Maybe she'd never be ready. I should go to bed, she said, moving toward the door. Early morning tomorrow. She felt Ethan's eyes on her as she left, heavy with questions she couldn't answer. Back in her suite, she pulled out her phone and stared at the block number in her contacts. Her hand hovered over it for a long moment before she set the phone down. Not yet. She wasn't ready to run yet. Just a little longer. Just until Noah smiled for real. Just until she'd given this broken family a chance to heal. Then she'd disappear. Like she always did. Like she always had to. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it just made her feel hollow. Ethan's trip to New York was a disaster. Not professionally. The meetings went fine. The deals closed as expected. But personally, he was a wreck. He checked his phone obsessively, waiting for Amara's promised updates. When they came, short videos of Noah playing, photos of small moments. He watched them compulsively, analyzing every frame. His business partners noticed. Everything okay, Hayes? One of them asked during dinner. You seem distracted. Fine, Ethan lied. Just missing my son. What he didn't say, he was also missing her. Missing Amara's calm presence in his chaotic life. Missing the way she looked at him without judgment, without awe, just seeing him. Not his money or his power, but him. On the third day, he cut the trip short. Made excuses, delegated the remaining meetings, and caught an early flight home. It was late when he arrived at the mansion. The house was dark except for a light in the east wing. Noah's room. Ethan took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding with irrational fear. Was something wrong? Was Noah sick? Had there been a setback? He pushed open Noah's door and froze. Amara sat in the rocking chair beside Noah's bed, the boy curled in her lap. She was singing softly, that Igbo lullaby he'd heard before, her hand gently stroking Noah's hair. His son's eyes were closed, his breathing deep and even, but he wasn't fully asleep yet. He was in that peaceful state between waking and dreaming, safe and content in a way Ethan hadn't seen since before the accident. Amara looked up and saw him. Her song faltered for just a moment before she continued, not wanting to disturb Noah. She raised a finger to her lips in a gentle, shushing motion. Ethan nodded and stepped quietly into the room, settling into the chair against the wall. He simply watched, mesmerized by the domestic scene before him. This was what he'd been missing. Not just Noah's healing, but this, the feeling of home, of family, of someone caring for his son with genuine tenderness rather than professional obligation. After several more minutes, Noah's breathing shifted into the deeper rhythm of true sleep. Amara carefully stood, cradling the boy with practiced ease, and settled him into his bed. She tucked the covers around him with such gentle precision that Noah didn't even stir. She moved toward Ethan, gesturing for him to follow her into the hallway. He did, closing Noah's door softly behind them. "You're back early," she said quietly, her voice still carrying that soothing tone from the lullaby. "I thought you weren't due until tomorrow. I finished early. Wanted to get home." He paused. "Is everything all right? You're usually not here this late." "Bad dream," Amara explained. "Mrs. Patterson called me." Noah woke up crying and wouldn't settle. "I've been with him for about an hour." Guilt crashed over Ethan. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to." "I wanted to," she interrupted gently. "He needed me. Besides, I was awake anyway." "Trouble sleeping?" Something flickered across her face. "Something like that." They stood in the hallway, the silence stretching between them. Ethan knew he should say goodnight, let her go back to her room. But he didn't want to. These stolen moments of conversation had become something he looked forward to, something he craved. "The investigation came back," he said, the words escaping before he could reconsider. Amara's entire body tensed. "And you ran from Lagos 6 months ago. Domestic violence situation with a man named Chidi Okafor. You had a restraining order, but he violated it repeatedly. The Nigerian police couldn't or wouldn't help, so you left the country on a tourist visa that expired 2 months ago." She wrapped her arms around herself, her face carefully blank. "So now you know. I'm here illegally. I understand if you need me to leave." "Why would I need you to leave?" "Because I lied on my employment application. Because I'm undocumented. Because you were running for your life," Ethan finished. "Because you did what you had to do to survive. That doesn't make you a criminal, Amara. That makes you a survivor." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You don't understand. He's dangerous. He has connections. If he finds me, he won't." Ethan's voice hardened. "I've already taken care of it." She stared at him. "What do you mean, you've taken care of it?" "I mean I had my legal team file for asylum on your behalf. I mean I have people monitoring Chidi Okafor's movements. I mean that if he so much as books a flight to the United States, I'll know about it." He stepped closer. "You're under my protection now. Both legally and physically. He can't touch you. You can't just," Amara's voice cracked. "You can't just fix my life because you have money. It doesn't work like that." "Why not? I have resources. You need help. It's simple mathematics." "It's not simple." She was getting agitated now, her professional calm cracking. "You don't just swoop in and rearrange someone's life without asking. You don't get to make these decisions for me. I'm not making decisions for you. I'm giving you options you didn't have before." Ethan kept his voice level, recognizing her panic for what it was: fear of losing control, fear of depending on someone. He understood that fear intimately. "The asylum paperwork is filed, but you don't have to proceed with it. The monitoring continues regardless, because I'm not taking chances with Noah's safety or yours. But you can walk away anytime. I won't stop you. You won't stop me, she repeated, her voice hollow. But Noah will be heartbroken. He stopped himself. It will be difficult. But I meant what I said. You stay because you want to, not because you're trapped. Amara looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her processing, analyzing, trying to determine if he was telling the truth or manipulating her. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. Why do you care what happens to me? Because you brought light back into my son's life. Because you make this mausoleum feel like a home. Because when you smile at Noah, something in my chest that died 3 years ago tries to remember how to beat properly. Because you matter to Noah, he said instead. And anything that matters to Noah matters to me. It was true, if incomplete. But it was all he could afford to admit. To her, and to himself. Amara nodded slowly. Okay, thank you. For the asylum help. For everything. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. Because nobody's ever. She stopped, swallowed hard. Good night, Ethan. The use of his first name did something to him. Made the moment feel more intimate, more real. Good night, Amara. He watched her retreat to her suite, then made his way to his own bedroom on the opposite end of the mansion. But sleep didn't come easily. He kept thinking about the fear in her eyes when she'd mentioned Chitty. The way she'd instinctively wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold herself together. Someone had hurt her. Badly. And every protective instinct he possessed roared to life at the thought. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his head of security. Increase monitoring on Chitty Okafor. If he makes any move toward the United States, I want to know immediately. Also, upgrade mansion security. Add cameras to the perimeter, increase guard rotations. Then, because he was already awake and his mind wouldn't quiet, he opened his laptop and began going through the asylum paperwork his lawyers had filed. He wanted to understand every detail, every potential complication. He would make this work. He would keep her safe. He would keep them both safe. The next morning brought an unexpected breakthrough. Ethan was having coffee in the kitchen when he heard excited voices from the garden. He followed the sound to find Amara and Noah by the fountain, and what he saw made him set down his mug with shaking hands. Noah was laughing. Actually laughing. Full, bright, beautiful laughter that rang through the morning air like bells. Amara had soap bubbles, the kind children played with, and she was blowing them into the air while making exaggerated surprised faces every time Noah popped one. And Noah was chasing them, jumping and reaching and making sounds. Not words yet, but vocalizations. Squeals of delight, huffs of effort, little exclamations. Ethan pulled out his phone and started recording, his vision blurring with tears he couldn't quite hold back. After several minutes, Noah seemed to wear himself out. He plopped down on the grass, breathing hard, his face flushed and happy. Amara sat beside him, pulling him into a gentle hug. And then Noah spoke. It was quiet, barely audible even in the garden stillness. But Ethan heard it. He heard it, and his entire world stopped. Amma. One word. One beautiful, impossible word. Amara froze, her eyes going wide. Noah? Did you? Can you say that again, sweet boy? Noah looked up at her, his small face serious. Then, with careful deliberation, he spoke again. Amma. Her name. Or his version of it. His first word in 3 years, and it was her name. Amara burst into tears, pulling Noah close. Yes, baby. Yes. I'm Amma. I'm right here. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, his phone still recording, his own tears streaming freely now. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of specialists and therapies and desperate hope. And his son had finally spoken. He wanted to rush to them, to scoop Noah into his arms and celebrate this miracle. But he held back. This was Amara's moment with Noah. This breakthrough existed because of her patience, her gentleness, her unwavering presence. He could wait. He'd become good at waiting. Eventually, Amara looked up and saw him standing there. Their eyes met across the garden, and in that moment, something passed between them. Understanding. Shared joy. Connection. She smiled at him through her tears, and he smiled back. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Hayes felt something that wasn't grief or fear or desperate determination. He felt hope. Real, genuine, terrifying hope. Later, after Noah had been celebrated and praised and was happily playing in his room with Mrs. Patterson, Ethan found Amara in the library. She was curled in one of the reading chairs, staring out the window with an expression he couldn't quite read. His first word was "Your name?" Ethan said softly. She turned to look at him, and he could see the conflicted emotions warring on her face. "I know. You don't seem happy about it." "I am happy. Of course I am. It's just," she stopped, struggled with the words. "It's a lot of responsibility. Being someone's first word. Being the person they trust enough to break their silence for. You've been that person for weeks now. This is just confirmation. But what happens when I leave?" The question hung in the air between them. "What happens to Noah when I'm not here anymore?" "Then don't leave." "Ethan, I know what you're going to say. That you can't stay forever. That this is temporary. That you need to keep moving, keep hiding." He moved closer, sat in the chair across from her. "But what if you didn't have to? What if you could actually have a home? A place where you're safe and wanted and—" He stopped himself before saying loved. "You're asking me to stay for Noah. I'm asking you to stay because we need you. Both of us." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes intense on hers. "I know I'm not good at this. At expressing feelings. At being vulnerable. My wife used to joke that I had two emotions, focused and more focused. But you—" He struggled for the right words. "You've changed something in this house. In Noah. In me. Changed you how? Made me remember what it feels like to want something besides success. To care about something besides business and survival." He held her gaze. "Please don't leave us." Amara's eyes filled with tears again. "You don't know what you're asking. My life is complicated. Dangerous. Chitty won't give up. He sees me as property he owns, and men like that don't let go. Then we'll face it together. You, me, and Noah. A team. A team," she repeated softly. Then, with heartbreaking honesty, "I don't know how to be part of a team anymore. I've been running alone for so long. Then maybe it's time to stop running." She looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan could see her weighing it. The risk versus the reward. Safety versus connection. Running versus staying. Finally, she spoke. Okay. I'll stay. For now. We'll see how it goes." She wiped at her tears. "But if Chitty shows up, if there's any danger to Noah—" "There won't be. I promise you." And it was a promise he intended to keep, no matter what it cost. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both processing the commitment that had just been made. Outside, they could hear Noah's voice drifting down from upstairs. Not words yet, but sounds. Beautiful, alive, hopeful sounds. "He called me Amma," she said softly. His version of Amara. "It suits you. Amma. It sounds like mama." Something shifted in her expression. He has a mother. Had a mother. He did. And nothing will ever replace her. But he also needs someone who's here now. Someone who can hold him when he's scared and celebrate with him when he's brave and just be present. Ethan's voice roughened. "Someone like you. I'm not trying to replace her. I know. And I'm grateful for that. You're not trying to be anything except yourself. That's why it works. That's why he trusts you." Amara stood, suddenly restless. She moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where Noah had spoken his first word. "I should check on him. Make sure he's okay after all the excitement." "Amara." She turned back. "Thank you. For giving us a chance. For staying." She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Thank you for making it possible to stay." After she left, Ethan sat alone in the library and let himself fully process what had happened. His son had spoken. The woman who'd made it possible had agreed to stay. And for the first time since the accident, his house felt like it might someday be a home again. His phone buzzed. A message from his security chief. Update on Chitty Okafor. He's been asking questions about Amara's location. Appears to be monitoring international flights and visa records. Recommend increased vigilance. Ethan's jaw clenched. He typed back. Increase monitoring to 24/7. If he makes any move toward her, I want to know before he boards a plane. And contact our people in Lagos. I want to know everything about this man, his connections, his weaknesses, his finances. Everything. He wasn't going to let anyone threaten his family. Not again. Never again. And somewhere between thinking Noah's family and Amara's family, they'd become the same thing in his mind. That should have scared him. Instead, it felt right. The weeks following Noah's breakthrough were transformative. The little boy who'd been silent for 3 years was slowly, cautiously finding his voice. He didn't speak often, maybe a few words a day, but each one felt like a gift. Amma. Juice. Book. Yes. No. Simple words. But to Ethan, they were poetry. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon 4 weeks after Noah first spoke, the miracle Ethan had been waiting for finally happened. He was working in his study when he heard footsteps running down the hallway. Amara burst through his door without knocking, her face radiant with joy. "Ethan, come quickly." He was on his feet immediately, following her upstairs to the playroom where Noah sat, surrounded by blocks. The boy looked up as they entered, his face serious in that way children get when they're about to do something important. Amara knelt beside Noah. "Can you tell Daddy what you told me?" Noah looked at Ethan. Really looked at him, making full eye contact in a way he rarely did. Then, in a small but clear voice, he spoke. "Daddy." The word hit Ethan like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the doorframe to stay upright. Tears streamed down his face, and he didn't even try to stop them. "Noah," he managed, his voice breaking. "Buddy, can you say it again?" Noah stood up and walked toward him, each step deliberate and certain. When he reached his father, he looked up and repeated, "Daddy." Ethan dropped to his knees and pulled his son into his arms for the first time in 3 years without Noah pulling away. The boy let himself be held, even wrapped his small arms around Ethan's neck in a tentative hug. "I love you," Ethan whispered into his son's hair. "I love you so much. I've missed you so much." "Love Daddy," Noah whispered back. The words were halting, uncertain, but real. Ethan looked up to find Amara watching them with tears streaming down her own face. Their eyes met, and in that moment, he knew. This wasn't gratitude he felt. It wasn't just appreciation for what she'd done for Noah. It was love. He was falling in love with Amara Nwosu, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do to stop it. That night, after Noah was asleep, in his own bed, having finally moved past needing Amara to sit with him until he dropped into unconsciousness, Ethan found her on the mansion's back terrace. She was wrapped in a shawl, staring up at the stars. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She shook her head, and he settled into the chair beside her. "Big day," she said softly. "The biggest." He paused. "I don't know how to thank you for what you've given me. Given us. You don't have to thank me." Watching Noah heal, hearing him speak, "That's the only thanks I need. Still, I want you to know what this means." "What you mean?" She turned to look at him, and in the moonlight, she was breathtaking. "Ethan, I'm falling for you," he said, the words escaping before his rational mind could stop them. "I know I shouldn't. I know it's complicated and probably inappropriate, and you're here for Noah, not me. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. Every time I see you with him, every time you smile, every time you look at me like I'm not just a billionaire or a widower or Noah's father, but just me. I can't help it." Amara stood abruptly, her shawl falling from her shoulders. "You can't. We can't. I work for you. I'm here for Noah. We can't complicate that." "Why not?" Ethan stood too, moving closer. "Who says we can't? I do. Because I've been down this road before. Powerful men who think they own me, who think their money and their control means they can. I'm not him," Ethan said firmly. "I'm not shitty. I'm not trying to own you or control you. I'm just asking, hoping, that maybe you feel even a fraction of what I feel. It doesn't matter what I feel. It's the only thing that matters." They stared at each other, the tension crackling between them. Then Amara did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward and kissed him. It was fierce and desperate, and over almost before it began. She pulled back, her eyes wide with shock at her own action. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do this. Not now. Maybe not ever. I'm sorry." She fled into the house, leaving Ethan standing alone on the terrace, his heart pounding, his lips still tingling from that brief, burning contact. He should respect her boundaries, should give her space, should focus on Noah, and let whatever this was between them remain unspoken and unexplored. But he'd never been good at letting go of things he wanted. And he wanted her. Not just in his home, not just in Noah's life. In his. This was going to get complicated. He could feel it. But maybe complicated was okay. Maybe complicated was worth it. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan Hayes let himself want something beyond his son's healing. Let himself hope for something beyond mere survival. And the wanting, terrifying as it was, felt like coming back to life. The story continues with escalating emotions, dangerous complications, and the slow burn obsession transforming into genuine love. But you've witnessed the foundation, The first smile, the first word, the first touch. If you're invested in Ethan and Amara's journey, if you want to see how they navigate danger, trust, and healing together, subscribe to this channel for the continuation. Comment below which moment broke your heart the most. Was it Noah's first word? Ethan's confession? Amara's conflicted kiss? And like this video if you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds. Because this family story is just beginning, and the most beautiful and most dangerous chapters are still to come.